Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. My name is Sachin Kalbag. Sometime in April 2023, a food educator and social media influencer named Himmat Singh made a 90-second video about Bonvita, a very popular malt drink that millions of kids and adults in India drink every day. He claimed that Bonvita is about 50% sugar, and instead of increasing immunity, the drink actually contributes to bad health in consumers. The video went viral across all social media platforms. Cadbury, the owner of the Bonvita brand, sent a legal notice to Himmat Singh, who then took down the video. Cadbury also posted a video explaining the nutritional value of Bonvita. Of course, the video still exists on social media platforms because, nothing goes out of the internet, and millions are still watching it. But as my guest today, Samarth Bansal, puts it, it is not Cadbury or Bonvita that is a problem. It is our food ecosystem and the policies that surround it. For something so basic, something so fundamental to our lives, food is possibly one of the most disregarded or misunderstood or even misinformed sectors of policy making or understanding. Apart from being many other things, Samarth runs Truth Be Told, a meticulously researched, written and edited health publication and newsletter that separates the wheat from its, gluten. Samarth is a graduate from IIT Kanpur. He's at 29 years of age, one of India's best known data scientists and journalists. He has worked with two of India's leading English language publications, The Hindu and Hindustan Times, as a data journalist. He has spent some time in New York as a reporting fellow with the Wall Street Journal's investigative team. In his current gig, Samarth, like I said, edits the extremely informative, easy to understand health website called Truth Be Told. He decodes everything to do with our bodies and minds. I'm a great fan of it and what he puts out there. And I have been a subscriber from week one. Today, I've invited Samarth to speak about food and health policy, but from a consumer's point of view, because, we all eat and we are all consumers. Welcome to All Things Policy, Samarth.
Thank you so much, Sachin, and thank you for the very kind introduction.
Not at all. Samarth, I want to jump right in. You've written about the Bonvita episode, but the Bonvita episode brought into the limelight both information and misinformation on an issue that impacts both adults and kids, nutritional information on packaged products. This, to me, as a father, as a consumer, is something that I think about every day. Each time I go to the shop, or my wife and I go to the shop to buy something. But we're not here to bash a hugely successful brand. But can you break down for us why this is such an important issue, and why do you think on social media? Of course, it was an important moment for India, but in terms of nutritional education, why is this so important, and how should consumers like, you, me, all of us look at it?
Right. So, Sachin, I think that in our education system, in our schools, in our everyday conversation, we don't really talk about nutrition as such, right? In terms of the basic science of nutrition, what to expect from packaged food. It is something that almost runs on autopilot. And what happens is this lack of complete understanding of what goes inside the food that we eat has given a way to food marketers to be super creative about everything that they can do on the front of the pack that we buy. So, flashy photos, fancy claims, all sorts of things. Now, that whole machinery of advertising and marketing, that starts influencing how we, imagine when we are in a supermarket, what we are buying. But the thing is that the moment you turn the pack, and if you know how to read the nutrition labels, everything that you need to know is right there. Most of the information to assess and understand whether something that you're consuming is good for you or not good for you. So what happens that when Raven put out this video and other things, you see Twitter thread going viral, most people, what they're doing, they're basically just turning the pack, zooming into the ingredient list and amount of sugar in something, what ingredients have they went there, and then they show it. And it just blows people's mind because, most of us never care to look at that part of the packaged food. That is what happened there. And I think it happened with me, 3 years ago when I started reading these nutrition labels. it's almost like, oh my God, what is this? What is this? I was consuming this, but I didn't know this. So I think that aha moment happens when social media influencers put these things out. That's what has happened. And the gap between nutritional literacy and I keep saying that marketeers are like super creative. So that gap is so big, which is why, this controversy, hits people right in the face when the information is right out there.
But the information itself is just part of the story, right? It's just the
Right.
The fact is that yes, we do read the information, but one of the key aspects of the food ecosystem is that healthy food is less accessible than quote unquote junk food. Junk food is cheaper, healthy food is slightly expensive or even out of reach of people who are not able to spend that much. In
Right.
which case, this nutritional information itself becomes the center point of understanding what you're eating. And yet, very few of us spend enough time on understanding what's going on there. But sometimes it's even economics because, even if I know that it is high sugar, high carbs, high processed food, etc., I still end up buying it because it's cheaper than most other things.
Right. So again, Sachin, to step back a bit, if you look at, like, say, the 100-year-old history of the packaged food industry, you will see that all of these things like convenience of accessing food, cost, like, and taste. These three things have been crucial in how products have been designed in the food industry. Okay, so what you said, right? Cost, like how do you reduce cost? And economics of it, right? So that is why design, and that's something like if you look at from the food company's perspective, these are the arguments that they give. That we want to make cheaper food, so using some kind of ingredients makes that possible. They also talk about taste, and that's like a very big debate, ongoing debate across policy domains. But is it something that people want? They want tasty food, they want junk food, so we are just supplying it, or is it the other way around that the ecosystem is as such that accessing healthy food has become so tough? So what can a consumer really do? So I'm saying here the debate becomes a bit philosophical, that like who is responsible for what is happening? Is it us? Is it the supply problem or the demand problem? So these are the things that are happening in the ecosystem. On the cost front, right, I think, see, that's almost like all of us know that, right? Like we pay premium for a certain kind of a healthy product. I come from this vantage point that what is happening right now is that, let's talk about the top 5% of this country, who actually goes to these big supermarket stores and is buying this quote unquote healthy stuff. But most of this is like healthy stuff is stealth junk food, to put it, more clearly, right? It's not really healthy. So, of course, there is this big debate about accessibility to food in general, but I think we should really break it down by, where the consumer lies in the economic pyramid, what are we catering to them, and for them, like what kind of products are being designed. Just to push on this a little more, I recently wrote a piece about bread, that, the bread that we get in the market, the modern day industrial bread, and how, how the nutritional value over like how the processes the industry uses has taken out completely the nutritional value of bread. Now, I was reading about it that there is an argument that people have made that if, like, bread literally is something that we, use as a, synonym for economics, right? That bread and butter, things like that.
Right.
So one argument is that, you want a bread that costs, $20 in the market. So if that is actually cheap calories for people who can't afford, highly nutritious food. So I'm saying that is an argument that has been made, but I come from this point of view that so much of what packaged food industry in general, not like one brand or the other, has done is that they have created this ecosystem where for us, even, having this conversation, right, about health food, like we are bringing in things like, like cost, etc. Like, again, just to tell you a bit more, like I was reading the FSSAI document when the labeling policy was being discussed. I got some, this data from CII, the Confederation of Indian Industries, when they had said, they were basically talking about like different products, the amount of sugar, fat that goes in it. The regulator had asked them to decrease the sugar, fat, etc. content, and their responses. So broadly speaking, the kind of things that the industry said were about the palate of Indians, that this is what we are supposed to eat. So if I reduce salt or if I reduce sugar, people are not going to eat this particular product. Second, they would say the technology is not available to make, say, a packet of chips if we reduce, X ingredient, things like that. So once we get into that territory, where we start thinking about taste, convenience, cheap, the debate becomes very technical, and it's worth understanding what the industry says. But I just feel that even if you step back as a consumer, for me, who does not understand the nitty-gritties of how the food processing works, the system is so hard, to really navigate what to buy, good stuff on the shelf, even if I'm willing to pay a premium. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But, I see companies by themselves, they're private enterprises. So clearly they want to maximize their profit. So we can't fault them in terms of reducing costs so they can maximize profits. They're also in the volumes business because, they sell literally millions of packets of, let's say chips, for instance, every day.
Right.
So, but at the same time, and they have, and like you said, because marketers are so creative, they have also price their products in a way that it becomes more and more accessible to everyone, in the sense that there are only 10 rupee packets or 20 rupee packets. They're not like 22 rupee packets or 20, because it becomes a transaction becomes a little more difficult at the supermarket level or the shop level. So these are marketing and financial decisions that companies take. And frankly, between you and I, we can't fault them because they're private enterprise. Their entire, reason for being is profit making. So, but at the same time, as consumers, because economics is also our decision to buy is also defined by the economics that the ecosystem that we live in, our salaries, our jobs, our kids, our other needs, our fundamental needs, etc. I'm more concerned about that aspect because this is something that very few policymakers talk about. For example, in the UK, the same company, Cadbury, for instance, spent a humongous amount of money to reduce sugar content in their dairy milk chocolate bar by about 30% because the regulators in the country said so. And there was, tremendous amount of auditing that went in, a lot of scientific research that went into reducing content of sugar in the bar, and at the same time retaining the original taste of the chocolate bar. And clearly, because the regulators were so active, the consumers demanded that, the company had to do something to do this. For example, another example is that how colas in America in schools have been, banned from a lot of states because they felt that drinking colas is actually, because of the high sugar content, is actually dangerous for kids. So there are these regulatory moves that, European countries or America has made. But there are very few such regulatory moves that India has made, especially when it comes to consumption by children. And this is where the concern really lies, isn't it? Because yes, the food that you give to children through packaged, content is actually cheap, and which is why it's the easy way out for parents. But there is, at the same time, very less information that parents look at before giving it to the children. And that to me is a concern because, we know that, childhood diabetes is on the rise. We know that childhood obesity is on the rise across the world, not just in India. And it has real world ramifications just by not reading the nutritional information on packaged food.
Absolutely agree on that. I think so there are two thoughts on what you just said. One is that, on the regulatory side, the system that exists for a quote unquote protecting consumers, and second is more consumer awareness, to make informed choices, right? These two things you mentioned just now. So, right on the first thing, India's regulator, FSSAI, there is a debate that is ongoing currently about, should we introduce a health star rating on front of the pack or a color coded warning label? So in both, the idea actually came from the fact that most people are not attuned to read nutrition labels. It becomes a bit complicated how to read, those calorie numbers or, what to make of it, what to make of ingredients, right? If you don't have that background knowledge, even providing that information doesn't really help. So came the idea that can we add something on the front of the pack, which is a very simple indicator to classify as a food as, healthy or unhealthy on a scale. This is a thing that other countries have tried, and India at this point is discussing which direction we need to go in. By direction, I mean, what is that label that will come on front of the pack? So it's an ongoing debate. there are pros and cons to, the two big schemes on the table that is currently being discussed by the regulator. So let's see where we end up with wherever this goes. I mean, we have to say, I personally believe that it's a step, at least this discussion is happening, at least some label will come in. It's a step in the right direction that, regulator is doing something, asking companies to make a super simple label to come on front of the pack. But however, when you get into the nitty-gritties, you start seeing that there are also complications with a very simplistic kind of label, where sometimes a thing that, again, see, this word healthy is, it's very complicated. No one knows what it really means when you use the word healthy. And the moment you do that, all sorts of things, you can make anything healthy if you don't define it very clearly. So in that perspective, you say add some dry fruits in a biscuit, which is say 60% maida and, a lot of sugar, and you add say 5 dry fruits, right? And you say, oh, my cookie has dry fruits, so it's healthy. Stuff like that, right? So all of that, how does that interplay with the two kinds of systems that we are debating is currently on the table. So let's see which direction we go in. But I'm saying that is one ongoing, effort from the regulator side. On the consumer side, see, I'm also honestly very conflicted on this, because I generally tell my friends that, look, if you spend 1 hour, okay, just trying to understand how to read nutritional labels, and then make it a practice that, every time you go to a supermarket, instead of, being in a very rush, spend 1 minute to read what's on the pack. It will become your habit. Then you will, over, let's say, a couple of months, that you will make super quick instant decisions once you have a framework. Okay, what is it that I'm looking for? And it's not very hard. There are 3-4 simple rules to follow. And then you can start seeing on the shelf that, yeah, actually options are available. And then you can, of course, figure out, is the cost worth it? Is the premium worth it? All sorts of stuff. But the point is that I think that step 1 doesn't happen. So step 1 is basically spending the time to understand how to read that label. The information is all the explainers are out there. We have published a guide on, how to decode marketing claims, etc. But so my conflict is whether is it something too hard for people to do? Is it something that we are just not consciously doing or what? But I do believe that if we start doing it, I mean, at least, I'm not saying that everything will become the most healthiest shoppers, but we can at least bypass 95% of false marketing claims.
Thank you, Samarth. That gives us the opportunity to take a small, short break, Samarth. We will meet you on the other side of this nice little promo from us. Welcome back, Samarth. Before we went on the break, you brought up a really important point in, what I think is really important for consumers, from the consumer's point of view. That is, how to make us, the citizens, the buyers, aware of what nutritional information is provided on packaged food. So it's quite understandable that, companies that use processed sugar, salt, fats will not create consumer-oriented awareness campaigns, because that some of them could as part of the CSR, but overall, you don't see much of that. In that situation, what can citizens do to get adequate and relevant information? You said that even the thing that you mentioned earlier, that is, spend just 1 minute in trying to read what is at the back of the packet, will take some bit of knowledge of what's going on there. And that is not something that all of us are taught or trained. In school, we are certainly not. In college, we are certainly not. And this is, quote unquote, extracurricular activity that we need to indulge in. Let's say, watch a YouTube video or read a book, or maybe read Truth Be Told to understand what's going on. but that alone can't be the solution, right? I mean, that there has to be some, holistic thing of, letting people know what's going on out here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I know that there are, entrepreneurs out there who are experimenting with ideas, say, for example, to build an app that, you can scan a product, and instead of all the thinking that has to go about, okay, how to make that choice and whether something is good or not, you scan a product and it gives you an explanation as a guide to make your thinking possible. So, that's one way, where technology can actually help. That at least if you're finding that process hard, Can algorithms help you make a better decision? So I think, it's all about consumer empowerment at the end of the day, right? Information can do only so much. The point is
Right.
like what you do with that information, right? And it's also something, I think this is a broader debate. Like it's not just applies to food. You can see that in, I think, so many domains of our life, right? Like let's say think about personal finance. How do you buy an insurance policy, right? What kind of mutual fund you're buying, right? All of that, the moment you start getting into the asterisk, right? Like what is written in the fine print, like just insurance, right? Like what is covered, what is not covered, what will happen in a particular situation. The moment you have like 10 different policies in front of you, like how do you decide? So, or even like where do you invest your money? So I'm saying that all of these places, what starts happening is that there is such information density on one side, and the consumer is just not able to figure out how do you distinguish. And that information arbitrage becomes, the like that's the play. Like even
Yeah.
in tech companies, right? When we talk about privacy policy, like how do you know where your data is going, what is happening there? So I'm saying that what we are discussing here in food about consumer empowerment, that is not just about food. It's a general, like I feel that it's a feature of the modern life where it's just hard to navigate so much information, especially when someone is trying to sell you something. And I'm not necessarily saying that, oh, there are these evil people trying to do something to you. I'm just saying that that gap exists. So we have to think about creative ways to fill that gap. That can be technology, that could be education, that could be government regulation. So that's how I think about all sorts of things. But end of the day, what I feel right now, at least in the food environment, that at all three fronts, we are not making like good progress. So for the time being, until things happen that are more consumer friendly, the only thing that I feel exists right now is for us to invest that much time, like to understand what's going on, because the policy front, like the regulation front and the tech front haven't really kept up to the mark at this moment.
Then perhaps you need, someone like maybe Carl Sagan, who did some so much for science communication. You need someone like him or her, to do to food communication, because it's so vital to our lives. We eat food all day long, and it's central to our existence, and yet we know so little of it. And perhaps that is why food communication becomes such an important part. And it's quite paradoxical that in an age, or perhaps ironical, in an age where social media is so dominant in our lives, the actual amount of information has got us more confused. We are farther away from getting the right information, or that getting relevant information. Not more. I'm sure that the companies provide you with the right information, but I'm more concerned about trying to understand how relevant that information is to your life. So there are certain chemicals that are used for coloring. There are certain chemicals that are used for preserving, but we have no idea what they do to your gut bacteria, for instance. Right? That is something that is so important for me to understand when I'm buying something for my daughter. And I'm sure millions of other families will have face the same problem.
Right. So, Sachin, two thoughts on that. One, I think, like, it's something more general that, like, even when we are conceptualizing, our newsletter, right? Truth be told, one of the things that, like, the way we were thinking about is that, that, see, in the press, in journalism and media, we saw that food was generally, left out for, say, the lifestyle section. So you'll have like restaurant reviews, you will have this new thing that you'll talk about cuisine, culture, all of stuff which I like to read. Okay. And I've also written about that stuff. So not downplaying the importance of that kind of writing, but I'm saying that the moment it comes to nutrition, most material is clickbait. Like I scanned websites of a lot of Indian news outlets. There is just not it's very problematic information. You can definitely, it's very hard to make any decision based on that information. Like, okay, like what should I do with it? And there's also a lot of misinformation about like very basic stuff. Or you will get like, okay, what is Alia Bhatt eating for preparing for this movie, which has no use for us, right? So that's a journalistic flaw. Second journalistic flaw is that we haven't really kept up to keep food companies accountable. So the kind of pressure, for example, say the tech companies have faced in the last 5 years, Sachin, when was the last time you saw that in India, for example, on packaged food companies? There will be episodic events. Maggie in 2015, okay? Bonvita, Cadbury today. But these are episodic. We haven't there are not even that many beat reporters covering or writing about food. So I'm saying that that's like from the journalistic side, when you're talking about, you know, so much being information, but it's leading to more confusion. So I think part of it is just it, that as a journalistic community, and I count myself in that community, we haven't really kept up to the mark about what we should do to, empower our readers. Second is that, see, this I wrote a note for this for the readers. I think that what is happening in the modern information environment, that there is so much information. So, but most information does not lead to more understanding, right? I mean, I can tell you, in a party that, like trivia, something about food, and you'll be like, aha, I learned something new. But is that leading you to make some actionable change in your life? Is it just conforming to your biases? Like, just think about, everyone has views about food, or don't eat anything that's white. Okay. Or, just do this and you'll start losing weight. I mean, all of us hear all of these things all the time. But is that accurate? Is that meaningful? That's, debatable. Second is that there is just so much bullshit around us, right? Bullshit in the sense that someone is always trying to sell you something. And singular goal of bullshitters is to persuade you or impress you so that, you'll buy some stuff. It could be something to an ideology. It could be a product. So I'm saying that's number two. And the third is that, and this is my personal view, that we are living in a world that is overdosing on entertainment, right? We want everything to be entertaining when we want to understand anything. So be it classroom education, how do we make it funny? How do we make it, super interesting? Everything we are going towards more and more of visual medium, be it videos or reels, etc., etc. And again, just to be clear, I'm not saying that you should not make funny, interesting videos, to educate. All I'm saying that, we have kind of come to a point where, the impulse for entertainment has become positively toxic. Because the more visual, we go, our thinking becomes more visual. It discourages deep reflection, or, taking a step back to think, okay, what is happening? And we become more of like passive consumers of information rather than more active, engaging, dialogue-centric engagement. So I think that is the information environment in which we exist. That's my understanding. And that's where we also started thinking about how do you break this to build a newsletter so that, that information gap that exists on actionable, that, we can bridge that a bit. And Sachin, what do I find? Like, it's been 8-9 months since we started this. Actually, we make, like, the world makes it super hard to think, what's healthy, but it's actually very basic. They would be like, broadly speaking, we can, like, there are like few rules that are like generally applicable, which have been constant over decades, right? Where there's not even much like, like scientific debate that, there's always a scope for confusion. Some new research will come up and say, oh, this study is saying do this, but that study is saying do that. So like, we're like, okay, what do we do? Point being, I think 80% of stuff is something that's super simple, not very hard, scientifically established, scientific consensus is there. And even if you just follow that, it's like, we can make good decisions on most days. Just the problem is that what is that small set of rules, right? Just getting there becomes super hard, right? So like just right now, you would have seen the debate is going on about this new obesity drug, right? Ozempic. If 10 years ago, there would be, something new would have come up about, say, oh, stevia is now in the market. So, you should have stevia, not other artificial sweeteners. You go a decade ago, there would be, I don't know, omega-3, omega-6. All I'm trying to say is that there's almost a cycle you can see in the nutritional world where every decade or so, something big will come. Some debate will happen. And like 20 years later, some new research will say, oh, that old research was problematic. So, I mean, once you start seeing these patterns, I mean, I also feel like everyone will feel anxious, right? Like, what do we do now? And that paralysis is where I think where we falter, if that makes sense to you. That's just a disease of the information environment, nothing else.
It does. I mean, you raised an important point. This whole thing about communicating what is right and what is wrong is also bereft of context because, those reels or those videos that you see are, 60 seconds long or 90 seconds long or 30 seconds long. And frankly, in 30 or 90 seconds, you can't put in all the context that you need. And that is really problematic because yes, I can make a sensational statement in the first 15 seconds of my video and then provide you with context. But who's got the patience to watch a 10-minute documentary, right? I mean, the problem really here is that I want to watch the headline, the equivalent of a print headline in the first 15 seconds, and then forward only that headline to my WhatsApp group or my Signal group or my Telegram group. And, everybody's, none the more intelligent or none the more informed. So that is the other thing you brought about was this cyclical, pattern in new quote unquote fads or, quote unquote debates. Some of the debates that have lasted longer than a decade now is the sugar debate. Most debates now on packaged food centers around that one ingredient, which is processed sugar. And this is perhaps the most, misunderstood or misinformed aspect of our nutritional information. Most countries, like we mentioned earlier, regulate the sale to children of products that contain high amounts of processed sugar, like colas or candy. We see such debates in India as well, but not not so much that they have changed our consumption habits. Colas are, selling like, colas in summer are selling like hotcakes. They continue to sell by the millions and millions of bottles, although there are these, zero sugar options available. But again, that is a different debate altogether, because we know that zero sugar is not completely quote unquote healthy. But I want to understand, from your, experience point of view, your understanding of data that you've read so far and analyzed, does the intervention of a government authority, does it help on the ground when it comes to regulating the amount of processed sugar that our kids eat or that, you and I eat?
Okay, so let me first answer. I've not reviewed global literature on, the impact of, say, taxes on sugary beverages and what happened. I mean, I remember vaguely reading in news reports, I think, that cities that introduced, say, tax on sugary beverages, the consumption went low. But that's not something that I'm super privy about at this point. But I want to take a step back and talk a bit about the sugar consumption and where I think the gap lies. Okay, so see, in everyday conversation, okay, at least in my circle, I think almost everyone today acknowledges that sugar is the biggest vein of modern day food. Okay, even if someone is not doing anything about it, if we are not like 100 years ago where we will debate whether sugar is good for you or not. The primary debate today is that, okay, how much should you consume? There will be some people who will go to the extreme saying we should eliminate sugar from our diet. So I'm saying that is a debate today. It's not about, it's well established that sugar is not good for us at this point. The problem is, Sachin, that I think the moment so much of sugar that we consume is hidden in packaged food. That see, you are making a cup of tea. You are adding 2 teaspoons of sugar. You will now add 1 teaspoon of sugar and you say, I am cutting down on my sugar intake. 3 months later, you will start having fiki chai that, okay, I'm not taking sugar at all. And you'll be very happy about it, that I have completely eliminated sugar from my chai. Next, you will turn to, as you said, right, Diet Coke. You say, oh, I'm not taking sugar, but I'm now taking, whatever, aspartame, the artificial sweetener, that is, so I'm off sugar. Let's say you start doing these things, but then you're eating bread. You're eating a salad where the salad dressing has sugar. Okay, you are eating biscuits where you don't even know what, in just one cookie, how much sugar you're consuming. That was the whole debate about Bonvita, right? People were just astounded to know that this health drink was 50% sugar. So this is the point where, I think it becomes very tricky that we do not know always the sources through which we are consuming sugar. I to take it a step ahead, right? I love desserts, okay? I would love to have a cheesecake once in a while or a jalebi once in a while. It's not that I'm eating it every day, but it's a birthday party, okay? And, I'm celebrating my sister's birthday and there's a small cake. I eat it, I'll portion control it, but I'll take it, right? Point is that when you're eating a dessert, you know that you're eating a dessert. You know that you're taking sugar. So the smart thing to do when you're eating a dessert is to portion control. But at least you're aware, right, that you're taking in sugar. Right. What about cases where you're absolutely unaware that you're taking in sugar and that starts affecting your health? That is a big problem. At this point, there are almost 60 alternative names for sugar. Okay? Which, if unless you know those names, again, I see packaged food, I turn it around, which says no added sugar. and you turn the ingredient list and you say, aha, it doesn't have the sugar that, like it does not have table sugar, but it has maltodextrin. Okay, now maltodextrin, like, have you heard about it? How many people have heard about it? I don't know. But maltodextrin is a substance that is, I read a report that it's the 10th most commonly used ingredient in packaged food. Okay, in India, if you add maltodextrin, you can add a label of no added sugar on the front of the pack. But the glycemic index, which, like, to make it super simple, when we eat sugar, our blood sugar, immediately spikes and then it falls down. And glycemic index measures how fast our blood glucose spikes after we eat something. So for maltodextrin, the glycemic index is worse than sugar, right? And you can add it in the packaged food and slap a no added sugar label on your product. So you see what I'm trying to say here, that there's so much hidden sugar just because it's not table sugar. And the reason is very simple why this is happening. Manufacturers know that we love sweet stuff, and sugar has other advantages in terms of food production. And they also know that most of us are trying to reduce our sugar intake. So then you get this whole new world of alternative sugar. So that's the thing, where, like, there's always a way to bypass things. Just to give one more concrete example, and it also ties to regulation, like how we label stuff. Rosa, right? The drink. Rosa is. I mean, I drank a lot of it when I was a kid. So Rosa is basically 80% sugar. That's the first ingredient. It's primarily and you know it when you taste it, but the label tells you it's 80% sugar. Now, I think 4-5 years ago, Rosa came up with a new product, which is a healthy Rosa, which says no added sugar. So what did they do? Instead of table sugar, they added maltitol. Maltitol is a sugar alcohol. Okay, sugar alcohol is, like, there are so many varieties of, sugar alcohols, but maltitol, for example, has half of the calories, as in to your regular sugar. But, so they're not like pure sugar, and the calories are half. But, it's not like just because there is no added sugar, like sugar alcohol is something that's, great for you. So go and drink it. So now here is the thing. When you turn the label, while if you have sugar in your product, they declare that it's 80% sugar in Rosa. In maltitol, they didn't have to tell us like how much of maltitol has got into the new drink. So I scanned multiple Rosa labels to find out, and I don't know right now because that's not mandated by regulator to tell me how much sugar alcohol is going in this no added sugar drink. So you see, I don't know if this became too complicated, but the point I'm trying to make here is that manufacturers have, gone a step ahead, found out ways to sell us healthier version of drinks. Regulation has not kept up yet. So you try to reduce the sugar intake. If you're drinking cola, that is a separate issue. You are then making a choice that I want this for whatever reason. It makes me feel refreshed. I like it, whatever. But I'm saying that if you ignore those things, if you ignore our consumption of cakes and cookies and ice creams and talk about this hidden sugar, like that feels to me like a very, like a problematic thing, because there we can't make informed choice.
Yeah, which is where we are right at the end of our conversation. We're running out of time, but I want to end with one last question, because I want to segue from what you said just now and just to tie in with the question that I had earlier, which is, yes, there is information on those packets, but we don't know really what is relevant to us. And right. These two examples that you brought out are quite relevant to the question that I had raised earlier. And this is where the gap really lies, isn't it, Samar? That I, as a consumer, and I consider myself as one of a person who reads a lot and tries to understand what's going on before buying anything for my family. Even I will be confused, despite my my background as a science student, despite my background as a journalist for so many years, and have spoken to industry experts, and yet I'm completely at sea when it comes to all this information. And which is perhaps why policy making becomes so important in this regard, where you have rules perhaps, or regulations that don't allow companies to bypass certain things that are so important for a human's health. While we understand that companies need to make profits. We also need to understand that health of human beings is perhaps even more important, and that is where all this policy making, which is where my original point is that the government intervention here has not been perhaps optimal to protect the consumer from misinformation or perhaps even lack of.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And I think FSSAI, I mean, in the larger FSSAI, as in the India's food regulator, in the larger regulatory environment in India, is considered to be one of the weakest regulators that we have, which is, as you brought out earlier, which is very sad, in the sense that food is something that like all of us eat. We talk about it, it's part of our culture, it's something that provides us energy, and yet, the regulator here, due to all sorts of reasons, it's FSI as a whole topic in itself. We are very weak there. So I totally agree. And I mean, Sachin would end on a slightly, optimistic point, like, not to be cynical about, this world. I would just say that, see, as much as, like there are these problems, I do see again in my own reporting that there's so many players out there, smaller companies, influencers, all of them who are trying to put in this effort, the gap that regulators have not been able to fix, to try out and say that, okay, can we make good product? Okay, can we break this ultimate myth that healthy food can't be tasty? I mean, that's something that we have been told, right? That healthy means bland stuff. It is not. You can make super tasty stuff which is healthy, right? So I'm saying that so many interesting experiments are happening out there. There are companies trying to do that. So that gives me a bit of hope. Even in terms of education, there are initiatives being taken. In terms of products, initiatives are being taken. In terms of when FSSAI comes with a new policy, like the labeling thing that I mentioned earlier, a lot of public debate is happening. The media is writing about it. So maybe it's a matter of time. I'm saying that, so I just want to end on that note that yes, the regulator is not living up to the mark. But then let's just say that, civil society and young entrepreneurs are doing things to take a crack at this problem. So that makes me a little, optimistic that maybe we can be slightly better despite all sorts of problematic things that we discussed today.
Thank you, Samarth. On that positive note, the victory of youth of Samarth versus the cynicism of old of me. Thank you. But that was a lovely note to end on. Thank you once again, Samarth, for joining me in this very important debate over nutritional information, and something that needs to have a larger context, larger debate across the country. Thank you once again for joining me, and hope to see you back again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, Jim. Thank you.